Welcome to the Speaking Podcast. You can find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. We're also on BitChute and YouTube. And I have the Awakening Podcast, the Learn Polish Podcast, the Meditation Podcast, and the Crypto Podcast, and all can be found on roycon.com. Today, my guest, currently based in China, please welcome Howard Whiteson, our charisma coach.
That's it, charisma coach. I put the emphasis on the ears, and I'll probably talk to you about that later, Roy.
Yeah, and I suppose, I'm just looking at your beautiful background, so those listening need to actually watch the video and see what I'm talking about. You might let me know, what's the background about?
So this is serious charisma going on behind me. Some people, when they see this, they think it's a green screen, but my partner, my girlfriend, is a wonderful artist, and this is her Chinese version of charisma. There's a lot going on. It's actually an unfinished work. So next time you see me, Roy, there's going to be more greens and blues and things. You probably can't pick it out. You certainly can't if you're listening, but there are some Chinese characters in there for charisma. And one of the reasons I love charisma is because it's ancient. You know, in Western culture, it goes right back to the ancient Greeks, and it's also an Eastern concept as well. So yeah, this is a zany, crazy background. And yeah, if you can't see it, you have to picture it: orange swirls and yellow swirls and all kinds of stuff going on.
It's very creative. So Howard, you might let the audience know who's Howard.
So I'm a charisma coach, and the reason I'm a charisma coach is very simple. When I was about 9 years old, I worked in a famous market in London called Portobello Road, and my father, who was an entrepreneur, left me on a stand selling maps and prints and said, "Over to you," and off he went for lunch. And I met people from all over the world. And those people, Roy, they were lovely people, but they thought nothing of taking advantage of a little 9-year-old and haggling over the price of the maps and prints. So I had very quickly to learn how to be soft and accommodating and friendly on the outside, but hard as nails on the inside. And that was the birth of charisma. And then fast forward 4 or 5 decades, and I've put that charisma coaching into people who want to go on camera in some way. So really, I'm someone who combines that early entrepreneurial and sales experience with my later life as I became a professional actor and then a professional coach around the globe. And the thread through all of that has been this charismatic presence that I feel is so vital, and not just for big stars, but for ordinary people like you and me who have to do lives or recordings or presentations to our bosses or our colleagues or sales pitches. For me, it's the X factor. It's the missing link in so much of what separates a bog standard presentation, let's say, from a truly stellar one, is that shining example of personality. So that's my focus, and it's been my focus, as I say, most of my life. And then particularly now in China, I've been here 8 years now. And people have told me that it's not only the fact that I'm a Westerner in largely an Asian society, but also the charisma I carry that helps me to differentiate myself. So to me, it's a great joy and a wonder to share those skills with other people.
Yeah, excellent. And we kind of have something similar, because I started at 9 as well. I was going around gardening, doing washing cars, delivering leaflets at 11. I started doing newspapers at 14. I was cutting grass, and I was 18 selling motorbikes. But I saw as well, because my youngest son, he's 8, and I started getting him into magic. And I know that you were doing that as well. And you were on TV as well doing that, yeah?
That's right. Yes. So my mother was an antiquarian book dealer, and she bought me an old book on magic, and I loved it. And I put on a show for family who were very polite and applauded. But very quickly, I found myself performing for fairly large crowds. And then I ended up at the age of 15 on Channel 15 in Chicago with a wonderful magician who ran a show there for many years. And magic to me is very interesting. It ties in with charisma, it ties in with drama, because it's about human psychology, and it's about what isn't shown, what isn't said, what's implied. And I found it a fascinating subject. And I ended up doing some card tricks for the late Michael Jackson, God bless him, Donald Sutherland. And so I had a wonderful time with magic. But for me, the acting was a higher form of magic, if you like, because that's truly transformative. And then the coaching is literally life-changing. So I think they're all forms of magic in the sense that they're all about transformation. And so that, I would say, is something of a common thread. Like you, Roy, I've done all kinds of different jobs. You know, I've sold candles, made and sold my own candles, and worked in a toy shop and shoe shop. As a jobbing actor, I had to do a lot of different jobs. But for me, the thread through it, all of it, was step back and find the magic, find the charisma, find what's different, and follow that.
Yeah. I think with the magic, the charisma definitely comes out, because you see some people, they do a trick and everything, but it's all about the show, how you connect, and the story and everything. And you've learned from a very young age about that, which is fantastic that you were able to then apply it to what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading about Houdini, who famously escaped from his various torture devices in very short order, but then he would sit behind the curtain reading a newspaper while the suspense built and everyone thought he was suffocating. And I think there is something of showmanship in great presentation. But I just want to be very specific about that. What I mean by showmanship is a deliberate adoption of strategies to raise people's attention, to hook them in ways that are beneficial for them, rather than, loud razzmatazz. I mean, I ended up actually doing close-up card magic where I was literally inches away from somebody and boom, something transformed in front of their eyes. And to me, that's a quiet, gentle form of miracle. And so showmanship can be very intimate. It can be very much interpersonal. So it doesn't have to be all loud, all singing, all dancing in order to make a really profound impact.
And with the acting then, because I know that you've been with a fellow Irishman, Pierce Brosnan, and there's Anthony Hopkins along with others. Like, when you were getting into that, like the learning and the lines and everything, because I know some speakers want to aspire to be actors. I know it's not an easy industry, but you might tell us a bit of that journey.
So I was very fortunate, Roy, that my training way back when was with one of the leading experts in improvisation. And this was before improv was even really a word. And so we would take a text, and rather than trying to cram memory and learn it word by word, we would pull it apart. We would improvise around it so that we understood really what was being said. And that, fast forward to today, 40 years later, and I'm still using the very same principles with my clients and with myself to give a structure that allows for freedom and spontaneity, but it doesn't result in you going waffling off or getting lost or going blank. So one of the, probably, you mentioned a couple of very, very big stars, and it was wonderful to act with them, but one of my most memorable was with an actor called Hugh Quarshie, who's Royal Shakespeare actor in a movie about the murder of Stephen Lawrence. And the director wanted what he called non-acting acting. And so it was improvised, essentially. We had a line, we had a direction, but the words and the way we delivered them were in that moment. So I think what I learned was how to be spontaneous under situations of extreme pressure, because, you know, on a Bond movie with Pierce Brosnan, every wasted second is hundreds of thousands of pounds, euros, or dollars, depending where you're from, or renminbi in my case. So it's absolutely imperative, where possible, to get it right, to get it technically perfect, but at the same time to be able to play and to dance with the material and to bring it alive. And I'll just give you one more example. My very first job as an actor was as what's called a showman in London. And all I had to do was, during the interval, change the set. So that was my whole job, a 10-minute job in the interval. However, that theatre was what's called a proscenium arch. And for those of you who don't know, that's like a box shape, and the actors stand behind the box and the audience is looking at them like in a big box television set. And I was able to climb up the inside of that proscenium arch and watch the whole show from behind that arch. And the principal actor on that show was a wonderful actor by the name of Albert Finney. And his role was to arrive singing on set at exactly the right moment. And he would start singing in his dressing room, and he would arrive in perfect timing every night, night after night, like a machine. However, every night he would change things. He would bring things alive in a different way. And actually, the younger actors who acted with him, I could tell, because I watched every night, that they were a little bit disconcerted by his spontaneity. And I learned so much from just simply observing a master actor at work, that really great presentations, really great speaking comes from a place of strong planning, absolute brilliant timing, and then dancing and spontaneity and bringing life to the material.
Excellent. And I know that you're a charisma coach for actors as well as for corporations and stuff like that. I'm assuming, like, I mean, we're living in funny times now, which, you know, unfortunately you can't even get out of the house sometimes with what's going on. And are you able to do that, you know, online? And the other thing is, because I had a conversation the other day and talking to a coach that basically, do you just do the audio or video? I would assume for what you're doing that you are connecting and that you're showing them, because you're, you know, trying to be expressive and everything.
That's right. So I deliver my coaching charisma on camera. I deliver it on camera. So here's the thing, if you're watching now, I can approach the camera and I can get very intimate. I can get very one-to-one. I can zoom out as I move away from the camera and give a big picture. That's extremely difficult to do in a huge auditorium of thousands of people. However, people, when they look into a cold, hard camera lens, often they get apprehensive, they get nervous, they forget what it is they want to say, they sweat, they go red. So I work with entrepreneurs, I work with coaches, course creators, as well as people in the corporate environment. And whilst they have different objectives, the principles are the same. They want to conquer their nerves if they have them. They want to engage at a greater degree, have greater authority. They want to remember where they're supposed to go, but without reading from a script and sounding like an automaton. And they have commonalities that can all be answered in the online world. So for me, that's wonderful, because it allows me, from my home here in China, Shanghai, China, I have clients as far away as the west coast of America, all the way right through to Asia and over to Australia, Europe, the UK. And for my way of thinking, although this period of time is extremely challenging, it also offers wonderful opportunities to learn in this digital space. So from my point of view, charisma, once you've got it, you can harness it and you can focus it and you can send it through the camera lens to touch people's hearts. And when you do that, it can be even more powerful than being face to face with somebody. And one of the reasons for that is when we're face to face, although we have the advantage of being able to read what are known as the micro signals, the tiny body movements that allow us to interpret the other person, whilst we may lose that, we gain an ability to assess what's being presented to us in a different way. Here I am on an audio, a podcast, or inside, if you're watching, a frame. And that allows me to control my presentation to you in a way that I can't do if we're face to face. And the same for you as somebody observing. You don't necessarily have to nod or acknowledge me or be polite even. You can switch your camera off, and many people do. And hopefully they're not checking out their emails and their Facebook or whatever, but they can be a bit more dispassionate and a bit more distanced. So I would say we're in an extraordinary era, Roy, where things are shifting massively in the online space. And for those who can take that opportunity, I think there's never been a better time to be an accomplished, charismatic business person or presenter or in the corporate world.
I remember before my overcoming my fear of public speaking, that I got on, I was interviewed for something that happened in Ireland, and I got so nervous. You know, the wheel was turning, the hamster was dead. And they didn't air it. They aired somebody that didn't really know what was going on because they spoke better. And like, I know there's a lot of people like that. So what kind of tips would you give somebody? I mean, no, I do live shows all the time and I've overcome it, but I know there's a lot of people, they can speak in a boardroom, they can do a business presentation, but put a camera in front of them and their legs will buckle.
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is warm up. Just like an athlete, when you're about to run a 100-meter race, you don't just go out on the track and run it. The athlete warms up. So I warm up vocally and I warm up physically, and the whole thing takes me 5-10 minutes. And for those who are interested, we can put a link and I can send some free videos about how to warm up the voice. But essentially, I'm breathing from my diaphragm, from my stomach, if you like. I'm resonating and warming up my voice by humming, and then I'm projecting my voice onto a far point on the wall. And just by doing that, warming up my voice, I'm also relaxing my body, and then I may tense and release muscles in my body. I can even do that if I'm sitting in an office chair, and just work through the body, tensing and releasing, work through the voice for a few minutes, and that will put you into a different and better state. Many people fumble with all the tech, the lights, the camera, whatever it is. They're trying to memorize their slides. They're worried about all this stuff, and then they go into the presentation effectively cold. Some people do stuff, but it's random. Maybe they jump up and down, or they say, "You've got this, you've got this." I recommend much more of a strategic approach based on physiology, because physiology links very strongly with psychology. And then there are things we can do emotionally as well. Just one tip, a lot of people may say to you, you know, when you look into the camera, you should imagine you're talking to one person. I agree. I would just extend that. And I would say, I'm looking at you, and you are not only a friend who gets me and understands me, but you're nodding and you're smiling and you're going, "Howard, yes, I get you. Yes, mate, absolutely." And with that nodding, smiling approach, I'm not having to fight to persuade you. You already get me. So it's not a battle with the camera, it's a conversation with a great friend. And I have to not lay claim to that, but my mentor, a guy called Paul Gordon, who's a wonderful artist himself, check him out. He showed me and taught me that particular technique, and I found it very valuable, because even as an actor, when I was in big movies, I never looked directly into the camera as I'm doing now. And so even for a trained professional, it can be unnerving to look into the camera lens. So that's a good tip. And then one other tip is, if that doesn't work, have someone in the room who you actually love or like. Have a chat with them first, get into your warm, cuddly mode, and then push that energy into the camera. And if you start losing that energy, you can look away, have a look, have a little smile, and then throw that smile into the camera. And take that energy of companionship, of connection, and bring it to the camera lens. So these are just 3 tips, very quick, but very effective. In fact, there's a whole host of methods, from mental, emotional, physical, vocal, that can be employed to overcome some of these challenges people face when they face the camera lens.
And I know that the breathing is so important, but also projecting your voice, because I know for years, once I got into the Toastmasters, that was always a comment. I spoke too low. And I got into a competition and I got a few levels up. And the speaking system, it was in a university hall where kind of, tapered up, and they had no speakers. What happened? So we had to project our voice. And I panicked straight away, because I thought, so I had people positioned in different places. And I said, put your hand to your ear if you can't hear me. But by some miracle or whatever, I was able to project my voice and actually won it and got on to the next round. But like, you might give some tips for projecting that, because I know some people are unbelievable the way they do it. It's like diaphragm that they're, not from the mouth and everything. So you might give us a few little tips on that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, learning to project from the diaphragm is what professional singers do and professional actors. So if you think of the diaphragm, it's basically a membrane at the bottom of the rib cage. And if you're watching, I'm now putting my hands around the bottom of my ribs, which I can just about feel through all the rice I've consumed here in China. And if you just picture the ribs as a round cage, and at the bottom of the rib cage, there are actually 2 little ribs that move. And so I'll put my hands on my rib cage, and as I breathe in, I picture that rib cage expanding out like a big balloon. And as I breathe out, I picture it contracting. So my breathing is coming from the bottom of the rib cage. And by doing that, I want to be doing it standing up, and so will you. You can start to feel the expansion and contraction of the ribs. And that is the membrane of the diaphragm moving up and down. And then once that breathing is in place, the second stage is to take that breath and to picture a column of air coming up onto your lips and just humming. And you want that hum only to be on your lips. You don't want it to be in your throat. You don't want it to be in your nose. And that is known as resonance. And the best opera singers in the world, they can make their whole entire skull resonate, Roy. And that is what gives their voice tremendous power. And then lastly, once you've got that resonance going on your lips, you pick a spot opposite you on the far wall, you open your lips, and you allow that hum to hit that wall. Or as you were doing, Roy, you were hitting your voice with your friends, you were aiming it at them. In fact, you were projecting. The danger of not doing it with the warm-up first is that sometimes you can damage your voice. So I would say, if you're uncertain, just reach out to me and I will make sure that you get that right, because once you've damaged your voice, it's very hard to get it back to a reasonable state. And once you've improved it, however, you can improve it for life. And it is a life changer to have a professional voice. And then lastly, just to finish, you know, I'm mic'd up, you're mic'd up, Roy, you're listening to this in the comfort of your car or through headphones. I don't have to yell in order to be heard. So the projection that I can do on a podcast can be very intimate and gentle. And if you're watching on camera, I can bring that gentleness in by really coming into your space and going, what about this? So projection becomes very much a microscopic experience. And what you don't want to be doing is pumping out your voice as though you're in a huge theater. So really, I'm learning how to expand and contract the voice through this diaphragm, the membrane, the humming resonance, and then the projection to where I want it to go.
Excellent. And just for those listening on the audio, this is one that I encourage you to go into the video so you can actually see what Howard is doing, because it's actually very interesting and so natural. And what I want to talk about now is, because I know you've got two monitors, because we just discussed that prior to going on, but so you're not looking at me yet. The way I've set up my system, I just use the one screen, and I've minimized it. So I've put my picture as close to the camera. So, but I know you're looking at your camera and you're making it so natural as if you're looking at me. And obviously that's a skill set. Are you doing that as well when you're doing the coaching, or have you a different system?
No, I'm doing that as well. And I'm looking at my clients doing the coaching. I'm looking at you now. If you're watching on camera, I'm looking at you. Now I'm going to look at my monitor. Now I'm looking at you, Roy, but I ain't looking at you, right? So many people do this, or they do this, or wherever their monitor is. Why? Because they are trying to gauge the reaction of the other person. Inside that tiny little camera lens right there is my little nodding, smiling friend. That's right, you know who you are. So it's a kind of slightly schizoid relationship one has with a camera. You know, actors have a shortcut for it, I guess, to say love the camera lens. I would say love an image. Some people literally put an image around the lens, but then they can start subtly looking away from the lens. You may be able to see that as I look up away from the lens. So I want to direct everything right down the throat of that lens. And then you observing me, if you're watching this on camera, now I'm talking to you and only to you. And one of the massive advantages we have as a species is our peripheral vision. It can literally go right out almost to our shoulders, right up, right down. So even though I'm not looking at the monitor over there, I can see in my peripheral vision, my hands are in the frame, my face is in the frame, and now I'm out. So this allows me to put all my focus into the camera lens. All that charisma is no good if it's not going to you and not reaching you. And if you aren't reaching your clients or prospects or colleagues or boss. So it is a bit of an art. There are other techniques as well, but I don't think we've got time to go into them because I'm compressing 4 decades of knowledge into really just a few minutes. But that should be helpful to you to just get that focus fixed right into the lens and nowhere else. Having said that, on occasion, it's perfectly acceptable to look somewhere else. And in fact, it's preferable because, you know, I don't want to be staring at people like a psychopath. That would also be wrong. So for some people, they can actually use that. I don't know if you know this, but apparently Marlon Brando never learned his lines in The Godfather. He had them written, literally written. I don't know if this is true, but it should be written on the bodies of his fellow actors. There are actually photos of that. I've got no idea whether they're genuine or not. But if I'm looking off camera, for you, those of you listening, I'm now looking up and to my right as though I'm thinking. Well, if I needed to, and I'm not using this, but I have in the past, I could put a few notes up there just to remind myself of my next subject. And over on the other side, looking up and to the left now, I could put a few more prompts or notes. So it's perfectly natural to use the space outside of this camera frame to help you, so that when you come back into the frame, you know exactly what to say, where you're going, and you've got that nodding, smiling friend to communicate with.
And I see you're standing as well. Do you find that that's better for energy? I mean, obviously you can move around better, and you know what you're doing with the lungs and stuff like that. That would be very hard to sit down. But is it something you're always doing, even when you're coaching, that you tend to stand?
I always stand when I'm coaching and when I'm doing any kind of presentation, even a podcast where I'm not seen. So that you're perfectly right, Roy. When we stand, our breathing is so much better. When we sit, we tend to slump, and then it can be that our stomach gets compressed and we can't produce. And you may have noticed I am gesticulating quite a lot. If you're watching on camera, I'm kind of the British version of Woody Allen. It's just my natural way. And if I sit, I find that hampers me. So for me, there's an ultimate link between the body, the voice, the heart, the mind, and the structure of a presentation. They're all playing on one another. And if I'm standing and if I'm bringing my energy into the lens, you can feel it. If I'm sitting, I tend to be more casual. Now, there is a time for that. If I'm deliberately wanting to have a casual approach, as I did with a podcast I had, then I would sit, because I wanted it to be gentle, conversational from my point of view as an interviewer. But when I'm being interviewed, when I'm doing what I'm doing now, Roy, I want to stand because it helps me bring energy so people can feel it. It's perfectly fine for me to say, well, I'm a charisma coach. But then if I say, well, yes, I've acted with Sir Anthony Hopkins and it was fascinating, and everyone's going to sleep. So we can shake that up by standing, by moving. And you'll also notice, again, a plea to watch this on camera. I can also bring energy by stepping forward, and I can take the big picture by moving right back and wider. And so that's very tough to do when you're sitting down.
Oh, excellent. And just quickly, and then I have a final question after that. Do you have a mic in front of you, or do you use a lapel mic, or what kind of system do you use for the sound?
So I have different microphones for different situations. For this particular one, I have a wireless lavalier mic, and I love wireless mics. Just a word of caution, really must make sure that they're fully charged. If you run out of charge in the middle, you're doomed. So some people prefer to have a wired mic that they just hook into their camera, and that's just clipped on. Where it's clipped on is also important. People tend to clip it up here on the lapel, and that, in my opinion, is too high. And you know, I'm quite an animated person, and I can speak quite loudly. Mine is actually off the shot. It's below. It's kind of on my sternum, just where the ribs meet, just above my stomach. And for me, the Rode mic, RODE, I think it's about £250. They're not up at the top professional range, but they're good enough. And then if you can't stretch to that, you can get pretty good lavalier mics, for 40, 50 pounds or 60, 70 euros, 60, 70 dollars. For me, because it's my profession, I want something very good, but I don't need to go to, Sennheiser level, which is, sometimes thousands. When I acted on stage, we had full on big chunky radio mics, and they were in some cases much more difficult now in the home office environment that many of us find ourselves in, or making videos wherever we are, moving around. I think a lavalier mic is great because it allows that movement. And notice you're wearing headphones and you've got a fixed mic, and that would be very appropriate for what you're doing, which is the podcast master. And, that gives, if you like, that deep resonance of voice that you can get with a fixed mic, a USB mic. So it does really depend on what you're presenting and how you're presenting it.
Yeah, because I use the Audio Technica, and because it's a USB mic, but I know there's a lot of different, the Shure one, some of them with the mixer, but there's plenty of times that I talk with people, like I do a show with two different people. They have a lot of problems. Are you hastening, and there's little connections and everything. So I think for the likes of me, simple as easy. You just one lead straight into the thing. And when you're charging that one that you mentioned, then the one that's not by the lead, what's the duration? How long will it last for approximately?
They last for several hours. They're very, very efficient. But over time, the battery degrades, so you will need to replace them. I also love Audio Technica. I think they're wonderful USB mics. That's the one I used for my podcast. But yeah, keeping it simple. Again, people can get very overwhelmed with tech. It's happened to me. I've got overwhelmed at times, but keeping it very, very simple. And again, I've got some tech guides if people want that kind of thing, because for me, the most important thing is to have everything support you rather than hinder you from bringing your charismatic self to the camera.
Absolutely. And finally, I know that you have an ebook that's out, so you might talk about that. You might just let people know about it.
So I'm very excited to announce, Roy, that the ebook is launching as we speak. So it's been over a year in the making, and what I did was I interviewed 17 of the world's experts on public speaking. I asked them all the same question, and they've given an absolute wealth of knowledge, every aspect of speaking, from the kind of practice, the technical stuff, the psychology, how to overcome nerves, how to deliver brilliant presentation. It goes on and on. It's an e-Bible. And because of that, I called it Own the Room. And it allows you to, in fact, own any room. So if you want to get a free copy, I'm making it available because of this podcast. I've had technical people literally working till 3 a.m. on this to get it. You go to ownanyroom.com and you just pop in your first name and your email address, and you'll get that as a PDF or an EPUB. And really, it's a reference book for life. I was so really touched by the generosity of people. They've given wonderful tips, tricks, hacks, techniques, and also deeper stuff that go really into the psychology. Some people get very, very apprehensive about public speaking, and there'll be something in that for everyone. Other people who are very professional but really want to go to the stellar level, there'll be something in that for you too. So reach out, ownanyroom.com, get the ebook while it's hot, and it will be my pleasure if you want to chat to me about it afterwards, or reach out to any of the authors featured in there. We'll all be delighted to communicate with you further.
Excellent. Listen, thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, Howard. So, like you've mentioned that website, is there other handles that you want me to include in the show notes?
I guess you could include my website, charismacoach.biz. And then if anyone wants to email me about anything that we've talked about, or if they want to get that those 3 voice videos, just send an email to howard@charismacoach.biz, not .com.biz, because charisma puts the is into biz. So charismacoach.biz, and just say, I'd love to get those vocal videos, and I'll send those over to you free of charge. Someone in my team will do that.
Excellent. Listen, thank you very much, Howard.
That's my pleasure, Roy. Thank you for having me as a guest.
No problem. So I'll make sure that I put all the links that he's mentioned in both the audio and the video. Those listening on the audio, I suggest going into BitChute or YouTube to watch actually what Howard has been doing during this conversation, because it's actually fascinating, especially when you know that he's not looking at me directly. So you can see that he's a skilled actor. So you'll find all our episodes on speakingpodcast.com. As mentioned, BitChute and YouTube, you'll find the links in the podcast description. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating, share with your friends. Until next week, take care.